Good day. Today we'll have the continuation of our discussion on the central nervous system. I will be discussing here the structure of the spinal cord, focusing on its cross-sectional anatomy and how it functions in transmitting information. Let's begin with the basic structure. A cross-section of the spinal cord is shown in this slide, where the white matter on the outside and the gray matter on the inside is shown. The white matter appears lighter because it's made up of myelinated axons. These axons act like communication cables, allowing signals to travel quickly along the spinal cord. On the other hand, the gray matter is located deeper and has a butterfly or H-shaped appearance that is primarily consists of neuron cell bodies, where information is processed and integrated. Now, focusing on the white matter, it is organized into three major columns or regions: the dorsal or the posterior column, the ventral or the anterior column, and the lateral column. Each of these columns contain pathways called tracts. These tracts are classified into two types: the ascending tract and the descending tract. Ascending tracts carry sensory information towards the brain, such as pain, temperature, and touch. Descending tract carry motor commands away from the brain, going to muscles and glands of the body. Now, let's move on to the gray matter structure. The gray matter is divided into three parts called horns: the dorsal horn, the ventral horn, and the lateral horn. The dorsal horn receives sensory input from the body. The ventral horn contains motor neurons that sends signal to skeletal muscles, while the lateral horn, which is present in certain region, is involved in autonomic nervous system, controlling involuntary functions. Now, let's look at how nerves connect to the spinal cord. The dorsal root carries sensory information into the spinal cord. It also contains the normal root ganglion, which houses the cell bodies of the sensory neurons. The ventral root, on the other hand, carries motor information out of the spinal cord to the muscles. These two roots join together to form a spinal nerve, which is mixed nerve containing both sensory and motor fibers. The diagram also shows a simple reflex pathway. In this pathway, a sensory neuron enters through the dorsal root, communicates with an interneuron in the spinal cord, and then a motor neuron exiting through the ventral root to produce a quick response. This is known as a reflex action and can occur even without direct involvement of the brain. To summarize, the spinal cord is organized into white matter for signal transmission and gray matter for processing. It uses ascending and descending tracts to communicate with the brain, and dorsal and ventral roots to connect with the body. Now, we'll focus on the spinal nerves, which are an essential part of the peripheral nervous system. They act as communication pathways between the central nervous system, the spinal cord and the brain, and the rest of the body. Their main role is to transmit sensory information from the body to the spinal cord and carry motor commands from the spinal cord to muscles and glands. Think of spinal cord as the body's communication cables. They allow the brain to receive information such as pain, temperature, and touch, while also sending instruction for movement. Humans have 31 pairs of spinal nerves. These nerves emerge from different levels of the spinal cord and are named according to the region where they arise. The first one is a cervical nerve from C1 to C8. They are 8 pairs of cervical nerves that mainly supply the head, neck, shoulder, diaphragm, and upper limbs. A key example is the phrenic nerve, mainly from C3 to C5, which helps control breathing by innervating the diaphragm. The second type of nerve is what we call the thoracic nerve, the T1 to T12. There are 12 pairs of this nerve. These nerves supply the chest wall, intercostal muscles, and abdominal muscles. They are important for breathing movements, posture, and trunk stability. The third one is a lumbar nerve, we call L1 to L5. There are five pairs for this specific nerve. They supply part of the lower abdomen, hip, and the lower limb. These nerves are involved in movements such as walking, hip flexion, and knee extension. The fourth sample of a nerve is what we call sacral nerve, or the S1 to S5. These are five pairs. They supply the pelvic organs, buttocks, and lower limbs. They are essential for leg and foot movement and also help in regulating the bladder and bowel functions. The last one is what we call the coccygeal nerve, or the CO1. There is only one pair of this nerve that supplies the small region around the coccyx or the tailbone. Now, to give us the function, the right side of the slide shows that spinal nerves are not just grouped anatomically. They are also grouped with their specific functions. The upper cervical nerves help with head and neck movement. The cervical enlargements gives rise to nerves for the upper limbs. The thoracic nerves help with rib movement during breathing and posture. Lumbar and sacral nerves mainly control the hip and the lower limb of the body. This reflects an important principle in anatomy, that the higher spinal nerves generally serve the upper body, while the lower spinal nerves serve the lower body. Now, how are spinal nerves formed? Each spinal nerve begins as two roots, the dorsal root and the ventral root. The dorsal root carries sensory or afferent information, bringing signals from receptors to the spinal cord. Examples: pain, temperature, touch, and pressure. While the ventral root carrying motor or efferent information, sending commands from the spinal cord to muscles. When these two roots join, they form a mixed spinal nerve. That means most spinal nerves carry both sensory and motor functions. Why does this matter clinically? So, understanding of the spinal nerves help explain why injury at different spinal level causes different problems. For example, damage to cervical nerves may affect arm movement or breathing. Damage to thoracic nerve may affect trunk control. Damage to lumbar or sacral nerve may cause difficulty walking, numbness in the leg, or bladder problem. Now, to easily remember them, spinal nerves link the spinal cord to the body. The cervical is for the neck and arms, thoracic is for the chest and trunk, lumbar is for lower back and legs, sacral is for pelvis and legs, coccygeal is for the tailbone area.